Greetings, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the U Talk Show, where I can't seem to get my throat working properly today, but that's fine because we are asking a very important question, and that is the Indigenous voice to Parliament. Will it work? Horst, what do you think so far? And actually, before you tell us what you think, why don't you tell us what the aims of this are, and we'll go from there. So what are the aims of the Indigenous Voice to Parliament?
Okay, so I'm referring to reconciliation.org.au here, because I want the people who advocate for the voice to be the people who are explaining why they are doing so. They specify that a voice to Parliament will give Indigenous communities a route to help inform policy and legal decisions that impact their lives. Giving people a say will lead to more effective results. Now, personally, I was under the understanding that that's just democracy, but further, they specify embedding a voice in the Constitution would recognise the special place of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in Australia's history, and importantly would mean that this body can't be shut down by successive governments.
Because that has been a problem before, hasn't it? Because we have had voices to Parliament in the past, but they've essentially just been defunded and shut down.
Yes, and in reference to the Uluru Statement, which was presented on the 26th of May 2017, the original call was for the establishment of a First Nations voice enshrined in the Constitution and a Makarrata Commission to supervise a process of agreement making and truth-telling about Indigenous people's history.
So it's very much essentially, from what I'm getting from what you're saying, an advisory board for particularly Indigenous affairs relating to history, land, culture, so on and so forth.
Yes, I actually have the proposed text of the constitutional amendment in front of me. And we are, those of us in Australia, in case you have had your head buried in the sand like some sort of very daft emu, we are actually going to a referendum about this. So I'd like you to try and use your noggins. I'm still not sure whether this is something that will work or will not. But specifically, there shall be a body to be called the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Voice. The Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Voice may make representations to the Parliament and the executive government of the Commonwealth on matters relating to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. The Parliament shall, subject to this Constitution, have power to make laws with respect to matters relating to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voice, including its composition, functions, powers, and procedures.
So in layman's terms, tell us what that means.
In layman's terms, there is to be a constitutionally established body called the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Voice. That body has the right to give Parliament information and to advocate for anything relating to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. And the Parliament gets the ultimate say on the structure of this body, of the voice to Parliament. They get to decide how it works. And that's the bit I'm concerned about.
Interesting. So,
well, you remember how you said that previous voices have just been nixed by governments?
Yeah, I'm imagining
there is nothing in this constitution that is stopping a parliament from simply making the voice so ineffective that it can't do anything.
Yeah, I was basically just thinking that was your concern. Interesting. So in a sense, that does make it, at least to some degree, susceptible to the whims of future governments. So essentially,
it also
government
means
doesn't like what it's advocating for, doesn't like what it's the information that it's providing. Then it can essentially do. I can imagine a lot of things. It could put a gag order on its information, state that it must be essentially confidential, or
that was one of the things I was thinking.
Secret. Yeah, and then they could still defund it at least to a point, Does it make any specific reference to the amount of funding that this gets? Is there a minimum?
I'll quickly check on that. But I don't believe no. It was just the only thing that has been advanced in terms of getting to Parliament and getting to referendum is that constitutional amendment that establishes the voice.
Okay.
There are no guarantees as to how it will be funded, how it will function. The only thing that we have is a bunch of politicians waffling about how, of course, they'll take this in good faith.
Okay, so there's one thing that comes to mind here, because you probably, everyone at some point has probably heard the, shall we say, exaggerations about the voice relating to the power it will have, of which it's effectively none. And
yeah, it
right
has no
now
fucking
I can
power.
only right now I can only, they don't even have the power to determine how it's like to make determinations as to how it should be
Their
set
own
up, or how
function,
the setup
which
should be
means
altered. Yeah. So like it's quite literally the only thing that it has the
I
power
don't really
to do
think
is
it's
exist.
satisfactory. Yeah. See, the other thing I will point out, and this is really important here.
Well, just before you do that, I just really have to point out just the insane level, like the insane contrast between what is being said about the voice by some politicians and what the voice actually has in terms of its power.
So here's what it is, right? Congratulations, people who are like worried about black fellas having a say. They don't have a say. The policy's designed to make sure they don't actually have any power. Congratulations, black fellas. The racists who might be worried, like they have no reason not to vote for this.
Yeah, and they have even, they don't even have the power to determine how to organize themselves in this regard. That, yeah, I think
it's kind of cooked.
Wow, I thought like, because I didn't get the chance to properly research this before this episode, but my expectation was that there'd be a limited, like maybe an initial setup given by the Commonwealth, and then they could alter their own setup determined by the needs that they have to fill, whatever that is, essentially as they.
There's another problem here though that needs to be contemplated. The voice is directly attached to the federal government. Any of you who are watching who are indigenous, I'm deeply sorry for how badly I'm about to mangle this, but we got to get through it. There are over 250 language groups of indigenous Australians throughout Australia. Many of them have different needs. Many of them have conflicting needs. The idea of treaty, which was advocated for in the 80s and 90s, absolutely fantastic. But we can't have it the way that the New Zealanders had theirs, because there is no single group that is Indigenous Australians that can represent them all, because Indigenous Australia is so fragmented and diverse.
I mean, it's
someone who lives in the middle of.
Yeah, it's an area that spans they lived over an area and still live over an area that spans the continental United States. Australia is a huge country. I think, are we like the 7th largest country in the world?
Not entirely like sure. But like the thing that I can think of that is probably going to be easiest to deal with is that someone who lives in the Northern Territory, so let's say Wankamadla, is going to have completely different needs, completely different attitudes than somebody who's living where we are in Eora. It's not going to work. I am profoundly concerned that the voice isn't going to be able to do its job. I think that having an Indigenous voice to Parliament is hugely important, but I am also aware that it is going to be complicated and messy, and more than a few folks are going to be quite uncomfortable with the process.
Yeah, I mean, as to the question of whether it will work, I came into this actually quite optimistic, and I'm not so optimistic anymore.
Maybe maybe it can work. Maybe the voice group will be able to find ways to represent conflicting, differing needs and desires in a way that is still useful to the making of policy. It's possible. I'm not going to say that this is too hard and throw it in the too hard basket. I'm going to say that there are going to be challenges, as there are with basically any policy-making endeavor, to balance the needs of various people and the common good, and to be able to work with this information in a way that is productive. It might work, but it's not going to be simple.
Yeah, it seems. I don't know. It seems like there's like it's really open. Like it's but open in a sense that like it doesn't guarantee anything. Doesn't guarantee. There's no real. The only thing that's really guaranteed is that the voice will exist. I find it the part that I really find odd is that it can't like it there's nowhere in the proposal, just to check again, nowhere in the proposal that it says that the setup can be or the functional organization of the voice to parliament will have the power to to alter its organization.
Okay, so I've just found a little more detail
function.
on the initial structure from NITV, which is a branch of the Special Broadcasting Service. And the initial working group specifies that there will be a national voice with 24 members, 2 from each state and territory, 5 from remote communities, 2 from Torres Strait, and 1 representing mainland Torres Strait Islanders. There must be a gender balance among members. Individuals will serve 4-year terms and can only serve twice. And 2 full-time co-chairs will be elected by the members themselves. And that the members will be elected by local and regional voices. There is
okay.
a lot of
that's okay. That's not too bad. That's not too bad. That I can see that setup working well. It's not so huge that you'll find a whole lot of like basically it won't get too complicated in a sense because it's not that huge, but it's big enough that you can get a decent variety of voices, decent variety of voices within the voice.
Okay, so apparently what we're actually getting is an indigenous chorus to Parliament.
Kinda, yes. I want to make so many musical jokes right now, but I shall refrain.
Hey! Look,
as long as they have didgeridoos. That is my one and only joke that I will allow myself. But
plus didgeridoo don't. But also, yeah, this is an advisory body. It doesn't have a veto over parliamentary powers. It doesn't have any real power to make policy. Look, there's a lot here. There's a lot here. I think that anyone who has been working in the reconciliation space would agree with me when I say that the mere concept of reconciliation, and the voice to parliament is a part of this idea of reconciliation. Anything to do with reconciliation has generally been protracted, painful, and there has never been a one-size-fits-all answer. There has never been a magic bullet to just make problems not exist.
I think, though, that in that regard, I think that this because the 24 members are elected by local and regional voices to parliaments. I think that this could provide a solution that, by its nature, is not one size fits all, but does essentially it's kind of like a good forum to bring concerns from local communities. That in that regard, it seems like it would work. In the like
I'm
hopeful. If that's the intention, so I think it'll work in that regard. the reasoning for putting it in the Constitution, essentially that it can't be taken away, essentially by a government
Unless
that
there is
decides it doesn't
another
like it.
referendum to amend the Constitution, which a future
Yeah,
government could very easily make.
well, they could make that, but if this passes, I expect it'll be a lot less likely to. It'll be a lot less likely to have that passed, but that's probably just my view on it. But that being said, I think that putting it in the Constitution makes it a lot more permanent, and it's a lot more safe um, from being dismantled. So in that regard, I do think it works. As to whether or
I
not it will,
think the other thing to point out is that there are some like indications of what Australians as a heterogeneous, diverse group of fuckwits want. And the overwhelming majority of Australians do actually support reconciliation measures. It's like between 78 and 86% of people, depending on how you take your data, who think that reconciliation with First Nations peoples is important and worthy. And the popular polling suggests over 60% support for the Indigenous voice to Parliament. So I think we're going to have it. Whether or not we say here that it works, whether or not talking heads on the radio or the TV raise their concerns, I think this is something that Australians want. And I think that having grown up during a period of time where there was a lot more blatant racism, I think that that's an improvement. That's an improvement that I have witnessed over the span of 20 years.
Yeah, I mean, we've gone essentially from Pauline Hanson on the rise in our lifetimes to, and her, very, shall we say,
bombastic
crude judgments. Well, I was going to say crude judgments.
I don't think we've solved
people.
the problem of racism. I think we've gone from being scared of our black people to being scared of other people's black people. And I think it's important to acknowledge that there is an element of xenophobia that still sort of sits beneath the surface of Australian society.
Well, I mean, look, I'm a little more optimistic about it. I think that I remember back to a movie where they say, hate is taught. It's something that's sort of taught, passed down from one generation to another. Although I would say that, that's only partially true, as we do have innate tribalism, and innate fear of the other. And I don't think that's going to go away for even centuries to come. However, in being educated and in understanding that about ourselves, we can choose not to adhere to it. And so
we can choose to be better than our biases.
Yeah. Much like we discussed in Cyclic. And with that, I'm somewhat optimistic. I think that we'll end up having the voice. And the voice, I think the structure of the voice as it is good. And one last question while we're running out of time. Is that structure of the voice locked in?
No.
So that
no. As per the constitutional amendment, Parliament does have the ability to alter the structure of the voice. Though from a public relations standpoint, I strongly suspect that at least at the beginning, they would only wish to do so as a direct result of requests from delegates of the voice itself.
Yeah, see, that, although what you just said makes me a little more optimistic, I still think that if the voice fails, it will fail because of that. Because it has no locked-in structure in any kind of way like that. It has
there are plenty of reasons for things to fail. Let's not predict the future just yet.
Well, I think that's probably the most dangerous point of failure, weakest point of failure. You know what I'm trying to say.
I
But
get it.
anyway, we have run out of time. It's been an interesting discussion, and I don't think we have a solid answer as to whether or not it'll work. You know,
Yeah,
right
as
now I'm
much as I
somewhere at
hate it,
60-40.
what do you think?
God, I hate that. Oh, that's what we even
We are
discussed this, I
trying to
think, in
encourage
something.
people to think here, Kyle, which is the problem.
Yes.
We don't want
Yes.
to be an authoritative source of truth. That's exhausting. We want people to be able to develop tools to help them make their own determinations about what they want
Yeah.
and
And additionally provide an
benefits them.
example of what productive discussion looks like.
Hmm.
So yeah, with that, I think we'll end it there. We'll catch you all
Mhm.
later. Thank you for watching, and we hope that this has been an informative and thought-provoking discussion.
Take care, everyone, and remember that it's un-Australian to not have a sausage sizzle when you vote at your referendum.